First off, we'll go ahead and get started. First off, I do want to thank all of y'all for being here. I was really afraid I was going to get up here and there was going to be like 5 people in front of me. There's 8 of us from Eastman here, so I really appreciate y'all coming and choosing to spend the next 30 minutes listening to me ramble on about rounds and recommendations. I do want to point something out. I found the timer guy. Not today. Okay, so let me introduce myself. I am Danny Henry. I've been with Eastman for going on 20 years now. I have moved into the reliability and asset integrity group about 6.5 years ago. Now, 13 of my years, I was an operator. I was out in the field. Eastman's been around a really long time. We hit 100 years, I think 2 years ago. We employ somewhere around 14,000 people across the globe, with our largest sites being in Tennessee and Texas. We produce products ranging from paint additives to adhesives to plastic hardeners, and then all over again with our molecular recycling methanolysis plant. Now, all right. Now, you may or may not recognize my accent, but I am from right here in Texas, just about 4 hours north of here. Our Texas site employs around 1,500 people, with 600 of those being operators. While I am now a global resource for Eastman, I am a Texan. I will always be a Texan. So I did want to share a few Texas things with you guys. First off, I'll show you a map of where we're located. So y'all can see Longview is up in the northeast corner of Texas. And of course, this week we're down here on the Texas Gulf Coast. Now, in Texas, we do things on a different level. We go big in Texas, and that goes for our scenic views. So real quick, I'll show you a few scenic views. So top left, this is Big Bend National Park. Beautiful overlook of a river there. The top right, that is a sprawling cattle ranch in the panhandle of Texas. So big views. And then this bottom picture, that's just south of here. That's in Galveston. So that is a beautiful sunrise over the Texas Gulf Coast. We like to take things easy in Texas, though. So, y'all, we literally march cattle through our streets in Texas. This is not one of those tests. This is the real deal. These are not AI-generated pictures. These are pictures of the Fort Worth stockyards. If you're ever in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and you can catch this, it's quite a spectacle. Those longhorns are huge when you're standing next to them. But, okay, so we like to take things easy, but when we're on our highways, y'all, we like to drive fast. 75-mile-an-hour speed limit on a 2-lane road in the middle of nowhere, East Texas, is common. In fact, we expect it. But on our major highways and interstates, 80, 85 miles an hour, that is the common thing. But if we're going to drive that fast, we're going to need some really big gas stations. How many of y'all have heard of Buc-ee's? Y'all, if you've never been to a Buc-ee's before, you're in Texas. This is the home of the Buc-ee's franchise. Go visit a Buc-ee's while you're here. Where else but Texas can you pull into a gas station, fill your car up with gas, go inside and buy a deer feeder, some kind of high-end clothing and accessories, a smell-good candle and some wine glasses, and a cattle prod? You just can't do that anywhere but Texas at a gas station. So check those out. So you can see in Texas, we do things on a whole different level. We're very proud to be Texan, just as Eastman is very proud of our equipment monitoring and reliability programs. Now, I moved into the reliability group as we were moving from Meridian 3.6 into version 4.3, and then I'm very happy to say that we just successfully migrated or upgraded, as Nick would tell me, into 5.2.1. So I think for 2 whole weeks, we were on the most current version of APM. So now we get to try to get to 2.2. But what I'm going to talk to you today about is how we took our equipment monitoring program from a smoldering program and we rose it from the ashes to become a thriving and actively growing R-bomb program. So let's recap where we were just 5 years ago. We'll take a step back in time, if you will, but at our Texas site, our R-bomb program was really all but dead. We were focusing a lot of our attention on getting out of version 3 into version 4. Our routes were way too long. We were running those routes on just archaic devices. We had no transparency for any of our readings or our routes or recommendations. Our recommendation processing was unorganized at best. Everybody was doing it different. So we were really struggling with that. Where was I? Okay. And in 2020, sorry about that. In 2020, Jennifer came to me and she said, hey, let's revamp our R-bomb program. And we're going to take these routes down to just rotating equipment. So during this process, we learned a lot more than just our routes needed reviving. What I learned was that I had to slow down and learn to listen. Our operators were telling us what the program needed. We just had to learn to take those complaints, their suggestions, and turn them into ideas, and then work with our APM team to turn those ideas into solutions. What our operators were really asking for was an easy button, and that's what I set out to give them. Now, that easy button did not come overnight. It was a process. It's still a process. First, we had to rebuild all of their routes. So moving from area to area, we leaned on the operators. They were giving us the equipment that needed to be monitored, and they were even putting it in a walking order to keep it organized. The operators were telling me what they wanted to see on those readings, from the allowable values to the descriptions. Now, and I was able to build templates to accommodate all that, but of course, not everybody wanted to see the same things because they can't give me an easy button. But for the most part, we use the same templates across the site. Okay, so now we've got all of their routes set. Well, what about recommendations? We just took all of their routes down to rotating equipment. How do we write a recommendation if something's not on our route? All right, we started going area to area, teaching the operators how to write those recommendations on the computer. And we were able to be successful with that. Y'all, I believe that this was a game changer. I look at this as being having the largest impact on our R-bomb success, having the operators on the computer. But we were able to teach them to write these recommendations in quick, easy steps. And we began to see the fruits of that as they began to write more and more recommendations. They were writing, obviously, equipment monitoring recommendations, reliability recommendations, even safety and health concerns. Our operators were beginning to teach us that there's so many more ways to use recommendations than we had previously even considered. Our operators were now to the point where they were beginning to grow the very program they themselves had sentenced to death just a year before. They were growing that program all on their own, and they didn't even realize it. So next we had to roll out smart devices. Y'all, when I tell you we were using archaic mobile devices, I mean old, piecemealed together devices. I was literally watching our computer specialist play Dr. Frankenstein with mobile devices. They were taking this piece from that device and that piece from this device to put it together to make one device that actually worked. All right, so here comes smart devices. We began this with the iSafe, top left there, the iSafe tablets, and then the phones, they're D1, and we needed those in some areas. But later we were able to roll out some third-party certified D2 devices in the iPhone. Now, all of these devices are shared devices. We do not have time to talk about shared devices. That's a whole different presentation all on its own. But working with our APM IT team as well as a full mobility team in Kingsport, we were able to cram a square peg into a round hole, and we made shared devices work. All right, so we've now streamlined their routes. We're running those routes on smart devices. Our operators are finding all new ways to use the program, and we have recs coming in right and left. Well, what the heck are we going to do with all of these recommendations? Well, first we need to develop a best practice, right? What we really want is for the recommendation to come in, for it to be processed, for our equipment to be repaired, and then for that recommendation to reach completion, right? That's what we all want. But it takes a quality recommendation to be able to do that. So our work execution coordinators began to coach our operators to see what they wanted out of a recommendation. And as a result, we began to see more and more quality recommendations, less rejectable recommendations. But now we've got all these operators comfortable writing recommendations. We're getting all these recommendations. We're starting to see a lot of duplicate recommendations. Okay, so I built a query for each department, and with one click, they could see a whole list of their recommendations. And so and our team managers would actually review those lists at the beginning of the shift. All right, so now they can see a recommendation that was written last night, yesterday, day before. And so as a result, now they knew what recommendations are out there, and we started to see less and less duplicate recommendations. Y'all, this is where I really think the operator's access to APM on the computer took our RBOM, our equipment monitoring program, to a whole new level. Sometimes writing recommendations on those little mobile devices it's cumbersome, right? Is it cold outside and I'm wearing gloves? Am I wearing gloves because I'm constantly having to stop and turn valves while I'm on my route? It's cumbersome to be able to do that. And so having the operators be able to write those on the computer was really helping. And with the query that we built for them, we were able to show the operators how those recommendations were helping them run a more safe and efficient plant. All right, so now we're ready to set some kind of standard for recommendation processing. So we taught our WECs how to flip a recommendation into a work notification in SAP. And with APM Connect, we're able to move the right fields from that recommendation in APM to the right fields on the work notification in SAP. Well, except for pictures and attachments. We still can't move those through the APM Connect, but Nick was able to make it easier for our work execution coordinators to get to those notifications by putting a link inside the recommendation once the notification had been entered. So basically, we're using APM as a one-stop shop, from recommendation creation to work notification creation, all the way to recommendation completion, and we're doing it all from one place. So at this point, our RBOM program was really generating growth all on its own. At Texas, our operators are creating between 1,200 and 1,400 recommendations every quarter. There's only 600 of them. Y'all, that is a lot of recommendations, and 90% of those recommendations are quality recommendations because of all the coaching that we've done. They're writing recommendations, they're reliability recommendations, they're writing them on damaged floor grading, railing. They're using the recommendations in all different ways. Our work execution coordinators are processing an astounding 90+% of those recommendations every quarter. 60% of those recommendations are being processed all the way to completion. So I do want to give y'all one example of an RBOM find, because I think it kind of ties all this together. It proves why equipment monitoring and rounds is so important. So we had an operator, he's running his route, he's got his handheld in hand. He comes across a heater blower motor that has high vibration on it. So he writes his recommendation on his mobile device. Well, when he saves that, it pops up on the work execution coordinator's backlog. Well, she takes this and runs with it. She understands the consequences of any kind of delay in a recommendation of this type. So our vibration crew comes down and they tell the operators, you've got to shut this blower motor down. So while it was unplanned, our operators were able to follow their procedure and shut that blower motor down. Now, as they reached the very end, as the heater was coming down to the final cool down temperatures, the blower gave it up. So had the operator not been running a proper route, had he not written a quality recommendation that the work execution coordinator was able to grab a hold of and run with, an emergency shutdown was imminent. An emergency shutdown in this situation would have cost us a $1 million tube bundle in that heater. And that's not even to mention all of the safety and environmental hazards. An emergency shutdown like this would have caused. So you can see how this is how equipment monitoring is so important, and how it can and will save us from potential safety risk and environmental hazards, as well as time and money. So for the first time, our R-bomb program was really on autopilot, if you will. So the operators feel as if they have a sense of ownership as they help to develop all of the routes. And they're proving that by all these different ways that they are coming up with to use APM rounds. We're not only running equipment monitoring routes in APM, but we're starting to put a lot of their housekeeping routes in APM. Fire extinguishers, safety showers, eye baths. And they're loving this because when they find something wrong, they can write a recommendation on it. They can track that recommendation until it's complete. So you can see how that's so helpful. Even our safety department is getting in on the recommendation game. We're right now developing a way that the work execution coordinators can designate a recommendation as a safety rec, and then our safety maintenance crew picks up on those recommendations, and then they're able to plan all of that job accordingly. But none of this is really possible without continuous growth. So how are we growing? How are we adapting to all of these new people that we have coming into APM? Once we got R-bomb really on autopilot, I really began to look for ways to make that easy button they asked for even bigger, more accessible to more people. We needed dashboards, a one-stop shop. Visibility and transparency, that's where we had to go to keep improving. What I was hearing from our operators was, I can't find my recommendation, or I don't know if that recommendation exists, or why do I have to click so many times to write a recommendation? All right, so what I began to do is look for a way to build them a dashboard, a hierarchy-driven dashboard, so they only see their equipment and recommendations. So once we got that done, now they can see all that. They can see the statuses of those recommendations right there on their dashboard. We even put their lube list on this dashboard. And I linked that lube list to the lube requirements in APM. So now the operators know if they look up that lubricant on APM, they know it's correct. They don't have to go dig through some notebook, some black notebook over here on the side and hope that somebody updated that lubricant. So we also added a table for route completions. The operators were asking for this, but if you want to see your route compliance go up, put it in front of everybody. When your team manager can see whether you've completed your route or not, you're going to see your route compliance improve. But really what I think became the centerpiece, the focal point of this operator dashboard was an equipment search to write a recommendation. So remember, this is a hierarchy-driven dashboard. They're only seeing their equipment, so they can quickly search for that. And Nick put a link on that table, so when they click on that piece of equipment, they go straight into a recommendation. Y'all, he even auto-populated the headline. I mean, how much easier can we make this for the operators? And we're seeing the fruits of that because they're writing more and more recommendations. But everything about this dashboard came from their complaints. Suggestions. But remember, this is their program now. I'm just here to help support them and help them succeed. I was able to do a lot of the same things for the work execution coordinators. They have recommendations coming in every different direction now. They were asking for some organization. So on their dashboard, I built the tables so that it would separate those out. We have R-bomb or equipment monitoring recommendations. We have corrosion inspection recommendations. I even made it so that if it's a recommendation tied to a turnaround, they can write shutdown in the completion comments, and that recommendation falls out of one of the top tables into a bottom table. So now we're able to keep track of all the recommendations that are tied to a turnaround. So where do we go now? Are we done? Have we reached the point that we can just stop looking for improvements? Well, what happens when you stop growing? You begin to dwindle. You begin to smolder. We cannot let that happen. We've worked too hard. We've come too far with our equipment monitoring program to let that fall apart now. Never stop listening, never stop learning, never stop growing. So where do we grow from here? Well, we can continue to put more and more different ideas into rounds. We have one area where the operators are running a visual corrosion inspection. So the operator's actually going out and they're looking for damaged or missing insulation, damaged or missing paint. And then they can write a recommendation on that and preemptively have that corrected before our corrosion group even has a chance to come out and take their measurements. Y'all, this was operations' idea. This wasn't my idea. Can you see that how once you prove a concept, once you give them a sense of ownership, the program will begin to grow and snowball all on its own. But that's not it. Here comes Rounds Pro. We just got into V5. Some of you may be using Rounds Pro. I would love to talk to you about it. But what I'm seeing from Rounds Pro is it solves a lot of the little nagging issues that we've kind of learned to put up with or find workarounds for. I'm very excited about Rounds Pro because I see us getting there by the end of this year in Texas and shortly thereafter in Kingsport. But we're also looking at advanced visualization. Y'all can tell I like to talk fast. I cannot say visualization without having to slow down. So I'm going to go with advanced viz. AdViz, because it's even easier. But what I'm seeing is AdViz, talk about a one-stop shop. Y'all, AdViz is a way to put all of our APM metrics right there on a dashboard in front of all of our users. We're looking at asset health. Couple asset health with asset criticality, and that's just yet another powerful tool that we can relay to all of our users in APM. Put asset health on an operator dashboard. No longer will you hear, well, why am I taking these readings? Where do my readings go? They're going to see it right there on their dashboard. They mark that pump as high vibration. When they open their dashboard, they see that. That's the advantages. Y'all, that is, in fact, the transparency that we need to take yet another step towards proactive rather than reactive. We must show our users the why so that they want the how. Remember, I'm just user support. I'm just here to help them succeed. Someone in my work group recently said, feel like help. To me, that's a profound statement. Feel like help. If I walk into a control room and I tell the operators, this is how you're going to do it, do I feel like help? Probably not. But if I walk into that same control room and I say, how can I make this easier for you? What do you need to help you do your job? And then I go back to my cubicle and I make that happen. Now, do I feel like help? I would hope that I do. Now, we all understand that software has its limitations, but if we listen to our customers, they'll tell us what they need, and we can find ways to do that. That is, in fact, my job. Collaborating, finding solutions, even if it means cramming that square peg into the round hole, we can find the solutions. Help your users, help themselves, empower them, give them a sense of ownership, then watch as your dead or dying programs rise like the phoenix rises from the ashes all on its own and begins to fly. Whew.